The boy in the wheelchair was so alone, until the street sweeper asked him to dance. Charity Johnson stopped sweeping when she saw that scene once again. The boy was there, alone on the park bench, staring into space while the elegant woman talked loudly on the phone with her back to him. For 3 weeks she had observed the same situation. Every morning around 9 o'clock, the woman in expensive clothes would bring the boy and leave him sitting while she handled her business on her cell phone. The boy never spoke, never smiled. He just sat there with his eyes lost on the horizon. "How about we dance a little?" Charity could no longer contain herself. She leaned the broom against a tree and approached with a smile on her face. The boy looked up, surprised. It was the first time in weeks that someone had spoken directly to him. "I know you don't know me, but every morning I see you here, and I think you must like music," she continued, extending her gloved hand. Ethan looked at the outstretched hand, then at the face of the woman wearing the orange and green City Hall uniform. There was something kind in those brown eyes that made him want to trust her. Charity began to hum softly a song she had heard on the radio that morning, while making gentle movements with her arms. Without waiting for permission, she delicately held the boy's hands and began to sway them to the rhythm of the melody. "Look at that, you're already dancing," she said joyfully upon seeing that Ethan was moving his fingers to the beat. It was the first time in months that Ethan had felt something resembling joy. His eyes, once dull, gained a small sparkle as he watched the street sweeper's graceful movements. "What do you think you're doing?" The sharp voice of Victoria Montgomery interrupted the magical moment. She had finished the call and seen the scene, immediately running to separate Ethan from the stranger. "Sorry, ma'am, I just wanted to—" Charity tried to explain. "Wanted what? Bother a child? Don't you know this could lead to a lawsuit?" Victoria pulled Ethan's chair forcefully, moving him away from the street sweeper. "I'm going to speak to your supervisor. What's your name?" "Charity Johnson. But I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying nothing. Stay away from my son." Victoria pushed the chair toward the luxury car parked near the park. Ethan turned his face back, searching for Charity's eyes. For the first time in a long time, someone had cared about him, and now that person was being taken away. Charity stood still, watching the car drive away. Something about that situation didn't seem right. The way the woman spoke about the boy, how she treated him, it seemed more like an obligation than maternal love. The next day she arrived at the park earlier, hoping to find mother and son again. At 9 o'clock sharp, the black car stopped in the usual spot, but this time Victoria got out along with a man in a suit. "That's her," Victoria pointed in Charity's direction. The man approached with a briefcase in his hand. "Ms. Charity Johnson?" "Yes, that's me." "I am the Montgomery family lawyer. My client is serving you with a notice for disturbance and harassment of a minor." He extended an official document. "As of today, you are strictly prohibited from approaching the child within 50 meters. Charity took the paper with trembling hands. She couldn't even read well, but she understood she was being threatened. "I just wanted to help the boy. He seemed so sad." "You are not qualified to assess a child's emotional state," the lawyer retorted. "If you violate this notice, you will face criminal charges." Charity looked at Ethan, who was watching everything from inside the car. Even from a distance she could see the sadness in his eyes. The boy placed his small hand against the window, as if he wanted to reach her. "You can be sure I'll fulfill what's on the paper," said Charity. But there was a determination in her voice that didn't go unnoticed. After the car left, she stood there, rereading the paper she couldn't fully understand. That's when Ms. Betty, the lady who sold boxed lunches on the corner, approached. "What was all that commotion about, Char?" Charity was known as Char in the neighborhood, a nickname the neighbors had given her because she was always willing to help. "The rich woman didn't like that I talked to her boy. That boy who's always alone in the wheelchair." Ms. Betty shook her head. "I always thought it was strange. He arrived about 3 months ago, and I've never seen him smile. Not once." "What do you mean, arrived?" "Oh, you didn't know, that woman adopted him recently. Deborah, who works there at her house, said the boss lady doesn't even talk to the boy properly." This information made Charity even more worried. If Ethan was adopted recently and seemed so unhappy, maybe there was something wrong with that family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, Please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. For the rest of the week, Charity couldn't get close to Ethan because of the notice, but that didn't stop her from observing. She started arriving earlier at the park and staying in strategic spots where she could see without being seen. What she saw made her even more uneasy. Ethan spent hours sitting alone while Victoria talked on the phone, always with her back to him. Not once did she show any affection or even attention to the boy. It was as if he was just an object she was forced to carry around. On Friday, Charity made a decision. She waited until the end of the workday and went to the house where Ms. Deborah worked. She knew the woman from the neighborhood market and knew she was a good person. "Hi, Deborah, do you have a minute?" Deborah looked around before answering. "Char, you can't be here. The boss lady said if she saw you around, she'd call the police. I just want to know about the boy. Is he okay?" Deborah let out a deep sigh. She had worked at the Montgomery house for 2 months since Ethan arrived, and what she saw there deeply bothered her. "Char, that boy, he hardly speaks at all. When he first came, I thought it was shyness, but it's been 3 months now and he barely opens his mouth." "And his mother?" "Mother?" Deborah gave a bitter laugh. "That woman doesn't even look at the boy properly. He spends all day alone in his room or at the park when she decides to go out. I've never seen her ask him if he wants anything, if he's okay. Nothing." "Then why did she adopt him?" Deborah looked around again, making sure no one could hear. "I shouldn't say this, but I've overheard some strange conversations. It seems like Ethan's real parents left him a good inheritance. The boss lady was appointed as his guardian by some distant relative and, well, you understand." Charity felt a tightness in her chest. Ethan wasn't just a sad boy, he was a child being used. "And what about his accident?" "What accident?" "The one that left him in the wheelchair." Deborah seemed surprised. "Char, Ethan didn't have any accident. He was born that way. He has cerebral palsy, but it's very mild. The doctor they brought in said that with physical therapy and stimulation, he could have an almost normal life." "And is he getting physical therapy?" "Not at all. The boss lady says she doesn't want to spend money on that, says it's throwing money away because he'll never walk anyway." Charity felt anger growing in her chest. How could a person be so cruel to a child? "Deborah, have you ever seen him doing anything he likes? Playing, watching something?" "There is one strange thing," Deborah thought for a moment. "Sometimes I listen to music while I clean the house, and when I pass by his room, I see him moving his arms, as if he were dancing, but very slowly, almost hidden." Charity Johnson's heart skipped a beat. Ethan liked music and dance, she had noticed that in the park. That's why he had responded so well when she started dancing with him. "Deborah, can you do me a favor? Can you play music more often when you're near his room?" "Of course, Char. Anything that might cheer that boy up. And if you find out anything else about his story, about his real parents, you'll tell me." Deborah agreed, and they said goodbye. Charity went home with her head buzzing with ideas. She needed to find out more about Ethan's past and somehow help him. Over the weekend, she visited some of the older neighbors in the area, people who knew all the town's stories. It was with Ms. Margaret, an 80-year-old lady who had lived there for decades, that she discovered valuable information. "Ethan? The boy in the wheelchair?" Ms. Margaret thought for a moment. "Oh, yes. His parents were Mary and John Parker. They left here about 5 years ago. She, poor thing, even worked for a while at a downtown dance school." "Dance school?" "Yes, she was a teacher. And you know what's even more curious? She always said that even with the boy's limitations, he loved music. She even took him to some adapted classes. Charity felt she was on the right track. Ethan had a history with dance. He had a natural connection to music, and his birth mother had encouraged it." "Miss Margaret, do you know what happened to his parents?" The lady's expression grew sad. "Oh, my dear, it was a very sad thing. They got sick at the same time, a very bad pneumonia they caught last winter. They left the boy with his father's sister, but that sister couldn't take care of him. That's when this Victoria woman showed up, saying she was going to give Ethan a better life." "And did she?" From what I see, the boy gets sadder with each passing day. Charity thanked her for the information and went home with a heavy heart. Ethan had lost the parents who loved and encouraged him, and now he was in the hands of a woman who only saw him as a source of money. On Monday, she went back to the park, determined to find a way to help. She couldn't approach Ethan because of the restraining order, but she could do other things. When the car arrived and Victoria settled Ethan in his usual spot, Charity began her plan. She stayed at a safe distance, more than 50 yards as required, and started sweeping while humming. She chose an upbeat song she had learned with her daughter when she was younger. As she sang, she made movements with the broom as if it were a dance partner, spinning and swaying to the rhythm of the melody. On the other side of the park, Ethan heard the music and turned his head towards the sound. When he saw Charity dancing by herself, a small smile appeared on his lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she noticed. Victoria was so busy with her phone calls that she didn't even notice the change in the boy. Ethan began to discreetly move his fingers, following the rhythm that Charity marked with the broom. All week, Charity repeated the strategy. Each day, she sang a different song and danced while she worked, always maintaining eye contact with Ethan, and each day he seemed a little more animated, moving not just his fingers, but also his arms in a subtle way. On Friday, something different happened. Charity was singing a slower song, making gentle movements when she saw Ethan close his eyes and sway slightly in his chair. It was almost invisible, but she knew he was dancing in his own way. It was at that moment that a woman approached her. "Sorry to interrupt, but are you the street sweeper who's been helping that boy?" Charity stopped singing and looked at the woman, a lady about 50 years old, well-dressed but with a simple manner. "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Sarah. I'm a social worker from City Hall. We received some calls about your situation with the Montgomery family." Charity's heart raced. Was she in more trouble? "Are you going to sue me too?" Sarah smiled. "On the contrary. The calls were from people who live here in the neighborhood praising what you're doing. They say it's the first time in months they've seen that boy show any happiness." "Oh. I'd like to talk to you about the case. We have some questions about Ethan's situation in the Montgomery family." Charity felt a hope growing in her chest. "Can you help me help him?" "I can investigate, but I need your cooperation. Can you tell me everything you've observed about the family's behavior?" For the next hour, Charity told Sarah everything. Victoria's lack of attention, the information Deborah had shared, what Ms. Margaret knew about Ethan's biological parents, and especially how the boy reacted to music. Sarah took notes on everything and promised to start a discreet investigation. "Charity, you can't stop doing what you're doing. Keep singing for him. Keep showing that someone cares. This could be crucial for the case." "But what about the notice? You're respecting the required distance. Singing while you work is your right. They can't stop that." That afternoon, Charity went home with more hope than she had felt in weeks. Maybe finally, Ethan could have a chance to be happy. On Saturday, she decided to do something special. She borrowed a small radio from her neighbor and went to the park at the time Ethan usually was there with Victoria. She tuned the radio to a station that played Brazilian music and started working. The first song that played was "Over the Rainbow" by Paul Simon. Charity knew it well and started singing along, making broad movements with her arms while sweeping the dry leaves. Ethan was on his usual bench, and when he heard the familiar song, his face lit up. He started moving his arms more freely, almost as if he couldn't control himself. Victoria noticed the movement and got irritated. "Ethan, stop making those strange movements. People will think you're having a seizure." But Ethan seemed not to hear. For the first time in a long time, he was feeling something like happiness. Charity noticed Victoria's scolding and felt angry. How could a woman try to erase a child's only joy? The song changed to "Amazing Grace" by Johnny Cash, and Charity started dancing a square dance by herself, using the broom as a partner. Her movements were graceful and full of joy, catching the attention of other people passing through the park. An older man who was walking stopped to watch and started clapping. Soon, others joined, creating a small, impromptu audience around Charity. Ethan watched everything, fascinated. He had never seen anything so beautiful and spontaneous. Without realizing it, he started clapping along with the other people, a wide smile on his face. "Ethan, stop that right now!" Victoria stood up angrily and went over to him. "Let's go, this place is turning into a circus." She started pushing the wheelchair toward the car, but Ethan held tightly to the wheels, preventing her from moving him. "I want to stay," he said in a low voice, but clearly enough for some people to hear. It was the first complete sentence Ethan had spoken in months, and the impact was immediate. The people around stopped clapping and looked at the scene with curiosity. "You don't have a choice," retorted Victoria, forcing the wheelchair forward. "Please let the boy watch a little longer," asked an elderly woman in the audience. "He looks like he's having so much fun." "He is my son, and I know what's best for him," Victoria replied sharply. But Ethan didn't give up. He kept holding the wheels and shouted, "I want to dance!" The words echoed through the park, and an awkward silence fell. Charity stopped dancing and looked directly at Ethan, her eyes filling with tears. Victoria turned red with shame. All those people were looking at her as if she were a cruel woman. "Ethan, you can't dance. You know that," she said through clenched teeth, trying to keep her voice down. "But I can try," he replied, still holding the wheels of the chair. It was at that moment that Charity made a decision that would change everything. Despite the notice, despite the threats, she dropped the broom and started walking towards Ethan. The crowd parted to let her through, as if understanding that something important was happening. Victoria saw Charity approaching and became desperate. "You can't! I have a court order!" But Charity didn't stop. When she got close to Ethan, she knelt in front of his wheelchair and held his hands. "Do you really want to dance?" she asked in a soft voice. Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Then let's dance." Charity stood up and began pushing Ethan's wheelchair in gentle circular motions, following the rhythm of the music still playing on the radio. Ethan raised his arms and began moving his hands in the air as if he were flying. The audience that had gathered began to clap again, but this time with more emotion. Some people were crying, seeing the pure joy on the boy's face. Victoria was paralyzed. She didn't know whether to call the police, scream, or run away. The situation had completely spiraled out of her control. "Call social services," someone from the crowd shouted. "This boy needs help." "I'm already here," said Sarah, who had arrived a few minutes earlier and observed the entire scene. She approached Victoria with a serious expression. "Mrs. Montgomery, I need to speak with you." Charity continued dancing with Ethan, who wouldn't stop smiling. It was as if months of sadness were being released all at once. "Ethan, are you okay?" asked Sarah, interrupting the dance. "I am," he replied without hesitation. "Can I dance more?" Sarah looked at Charity with gratitude. That simple woman had achieved in a few minutes what months of therapy perhaps could not, getting Ethan to speak and express his desires. "Mrs. Victoria, I'm going to need you to come with me for a conversation," said Sarah. "We have some legal matters to resolve." "About what?" "About proper care for a child with a disability, about encouraging development, about love and affection. Basic things that every child deserves to receive." Victoria realized she was in serious trouble. The crowd was still there, many people recording with their cell phones, and now there was a social worker making official inquiries. "Ethan is coming with me now," she said, trying to regain control. "Actually," Sarah intervened, "I think it's better for Ethan to stay here for now. I'm going to call a team to do a proper assessment of the situation." "You can't stop me from taking my son." "Ethan is not technically your son," Sarah calmly retorted. "You are his guardian, which is a temporary responsibility that can be revoked if it's not being properly exercised." While the two women argued, Charity focused on Ethan. She sat on the bench next to his wheelchair and asked, "Ethan, tell me something. Did you like to dance before you came to live with Aunt Victoria?" He nodded enthusiastically. "My mother used to take me to classes. She said I danced with my heart even without using my legs." "And would you like to dance again?" "More than anything in the world," replied Ethan, his eyes shining. Charity looked at Sarah, who had overheard the conversation. "Sarah, is there any dance school here in town that accepts children with disabilities?" "There are a few, but it's expensive. The City Hall has some social programs, but he would need an assessment." "What if we created something right here in the park?" suggested Charity. "Free dance lessons for all children, including those with disabilities." Ethan clapped his hands excitedly. "Would that be possible?" he asked Sarah. "With the right paperwork and some safety requirements, yes," replied Sarah, impressed by Charity's determination. Victoria, who had heard the whole conversation, exploded. "This is ridiculous. You can't just start a project without my authorization. I am Ethan's legal guardian." "Ms. Montgomery," said Sarah in a firm voice, "as of now you are under investigation by social services. Your guardianship rights are suspended until we can verify that you are providing a suitable environment for Ethan's development." "This is absurd." "What's absurd is a child going for months without speaking, without smiling, without any stimulation for his development," Sarah retorted. "Ethan will be placed temporarily in specialized care while we investigate the situation." Ethan got scared. "I don't want to go to a strange place. Can I stay with Aunt Shah?" Everyone looked at Charity, who was surprised by the request. "Ethan, sweetheart, I live in a very simple house. I don't even have a separate room for you. I don't mind. You're the first person who's made me happy in a long time." Sarah thought for a moment. It was a complex situation, but there were legal precedents for temporary placements with people who had demonstrated an emotional bond with the child. "Charity, would you be available to be Ethan's temporary caregiver while we sort out the legal situation?" Charity looked at Ethan, who was watching her hopefully. "Of course. I would do anything for him." "Great. I'll prepare the necessary paperwork. Ethan will be in your temporary care with supervision from social services until we definitively resolve the guardianship issue." Victoria was furious. "You can't just hand my son over to a street sweeper. She isn't capable of taking care of him." "Ms. Montgomery," Sarah interrupted, "financial means are not the only criteria for caring for a child. In fact, it's not always the most important thing. Ethan needs love, attention, and developmental stimulation, things that, from what I observed today, he was not receiving." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Charity, the street sweeper who danced in the park, had become the temporary guardian of the boy in the wheelchair. Some people criticized, saying she wasn't capable, but most supported the decision. Ms. Betty from the snack shop was one of the first to offer help. "Char, if you need anything for the boy, just say the word. I have some toys my grandson doesn't use anymore." Deborah, the maid who had worked at Victoria's house, also sought out Charity. "Char, I brought some of Ethan's clothes that were left at the house, and there's something you need to know." "What is it?" "I found a box in his room, hidden in the closet. Inside were some dance trophies and a few photos of him when he was younger, dancing with his real mother." Charity took the box carefully. When she opened it, her eyes filled with tears. There were 5 small trophies from adapted dance competitions and several photos of Ethan with a smiling woman, both wearing dance outfits. "He was a real dancer," murmured Charity. "And a very good one from what I saw on the trophies," confirmed Deborah. Charity took the box home, where Ethan was resting on the sofa she had set up as a bed for him. When he saw the trophies, he started to cry. "I thought Aunt Victoria had thrown them away," he said between sobs. "Why did she hide these things from you?" "She said dancing would make me suffer, that it was better to forget, because I would never be able to compete like before." Charity sat beside him on the sofa. "Ethan, I don't know much about dance, but I know there are different ways to dance. And from what I saw today in the park, you haven't lost that skill." "But I can't move like I used to." "So what? You move in your own way, and it's beautiful. Today when we danced, the whole park was moved." Ethan smiled through his tears. "Aunt Shah, do you think I could ever compete again?" "I think you can do anything you want, in your own way." That night, Charity searched online for dance for people with disabilities. She discovered there were specific categories, national and even international competitions. Ethan could indeed compete again if he wanted to. On Monday, Sarah showed up at Charity's house with good news. The investigation into Victoria Montgomery revealed some serious irregularities. she was diverting part of the pension Ethan receives from his biological parents for personal expenses. Furthermore, she wasn't providing the necessary medical and therapeutic care. What does that mean? It means her guardianship has been permanently revoked. Ethan will be available for adoption. Charity felt her heart race. And can I? You can apply, yes. Given the bond you've already developed and the demonstrated well-being of Ethan under your care, you have a great chance of having the request approved. Ethan, who had been listening from the kitchen, shouted with joy. Does that mean I can stay with Aunt Shah forever? Sarah smiled. If she wants you, yes. Of course I want you, said Charity, hugging Ethan. You're already my son in my heart. The next few months were a time of adjustment. Charity had to learn about Ethan's specific needs, about physical therapy, about adaptive equipment. But every challenge was overcome with love and determination. The dance project in the park became a reality. The city hall provided a covered space and some basic equipment. Charity, with the help of a volunteer instructor, began teaching adapted dance classes 3 times a week. Ethan was the first student, but soon other children with and without disabilities began to participate. The initiative caught the attention of the local media, which did a story on the street sweeper, who turned a park into a center for inclusion. With the publicity, donations started coming in. Better sound equipment, dance outfits, even sport wheelchairs for the children who needed them. Ethan progressed quickly. His arm movements became more fluid, his coordination improved, and most importantly, his confidence grew. He started smiling every day and talking about his dreams again. Aunt Shah, when I grow up, I want to be a dance teacher like you, he said one day after class. You can already start teaching the younger children, suggested Charity. You know more about dance than I do. And that's how Ethan, at 10 years old, became the junior assistant for the classes. He taught the arm movements to the other children in wheelchairs and encouraged those who arrived shy and insecure. 6 months later, the first regional adapted dance competition would be held in Washington, D.C. Ethan begged to participate. Aunt Shah, I want to show everyone that we really can dance. Charity was afraid. What if he didn't do well? What if it frustrated him? But when she saw the determination in the boy's eyes, she knew she couldn't say no. All right, but we're going to practice a lot. For 2 months, Ethan trained every day. Charity adapted a choreography especially for him, incorporating movements that highlighted his expressiveness and technique with his arms. The chosen song was Amazing Grace, the same one that had played on the day they danced together for the first time in the park. On the day of the competition, half the neighborhood traveled to Washington, D.C. to cheer for Ethan. Miss Betty chartered a bus, Deborah brought encouragement banners, and even Sarah went representing City Hall. When Ethan entered the dance floor, he was nervous. There were many experienced competitors, some who had been dancing for years. Remember what we talked about, said Charity, holding his hands. You're not here to win, you're here to show that it's possible. But I want to win too, admitted Ethan with a mischievous smile. The music started, and Ethan was transformed. All the months of sadness, all the pain of losing his parents, all the joy of having found a new family, all of it turned into movement. His arms told a story. They spoke of resilience, of love, of hope. The audience fell into absolute silence, hypnotized by the performance. When the music ended, there were a few seconds of silence before an explosion of applause. People were crying, including some of the judges. Ethan didn't win first place, but he came in third, which for a first competition was extraordinary. More important than that, he had proven to himself that he could achieve his dreams. Aunt Shah, thank you for believing in me, he said, holding the trophy. Thank you for teaching me that love has no limits, she replied, hugging him. Charity's life changed completely after Ethan arrived. She had to learn to divide her time between her work as a street sweeper and taking care of him, but she never felt overwhelmed. On the contrary, she felt more complete than ever. Ethan enrolled in a regular school that had an inclusion program. Charity made a point of closely following his studies and participating in all school activities. My mother is a street sweeper, and she's the smartest person I know, Ethan said during a school presentation, making Charity cry with emotion. The dance project in the park grew. They managed to get funding to hire a specialized teacher and expand the activities. Children from all over the city started to participate. Victoria never showed up again. Charity found out from Sarah that she had moved to another city, but it didn't matter anymore. Ethan had a new life, a family that truly loved him. 1 year after the first competition, Ethan decided he wanted to try a more challenging category, partner dance. The problem was finding a partner. "Aunt Shah, don't you want to dance with me?" he asked one day. "Ethan, I don't really know how to dance. I just improvise. But you're the one who taught me that dancing is about feeling the music in your heart. You know that better than anyone." Charity signed up for a basic dance course, and for 3 months, she and Ethan trained together. It was an unusual sight. A 50-year-old woman and an 11-year-old boy, her standing and him in his chair, dancing as if they had been partners for decades. In the second competition, they performed together. The choreography told the story of mother and son, of their meeting, of a love that overcomes barriers. This time, they won first place. When they stepped onto the podium, Charity looked out at the audience and saw emotional faces. She saw Ms. Betty crying, Sarah applauding on her feet, Deborah shouting with joy. But most of all, she saw Ethan beaming with happiness. "Mom," he said for the first time, officially, since the adoption had been finalized the week before. "We did it." "We sure did, my son. We managed to show that love is the most beautiful dance of all." From that day on, they became known nationally. They received invitations to perform in other states, to give talks about inclusion and to participate in television shows, but they never stopped giving lessons in the neighborhood park. That was where it had all begun, and that was where they wanted to continue making a difference in the lives of other children. Ethan grew up to become not only an award-winning dancer, but also an activist for the rights of people with disabilities. At 16, he founded an NGO that promoted inclusive dance in underprivileged communities. Charity Johnson quit her job as a street sweeper to dedicate herself fully to the project. Over time, they managed to build their own school with modern equipment and specialized teachers. "You know, Mom," Ethan said one afternoon, now 18, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't approached me that morning in the park. And what do you think? I think I'd still be alone, sad, not knowing I could fly." Charity smiled, looking at her son, who was now a confident and accomplished young man. "Ethan, you always knew how to fly. I just reminded you of that." They were in the park where it had all started. It was Sunday morning, and dozens of children were participating in the free lessons they offered. Some in wheelchairs, others with different types of disabilities, many without any physical limitations. All dancing together, all happy, all knowing they were capable of achieving their dreams. "Mom, thank you for teaching me that the real dance happens in the heart. And thank you, my son, for teaching me that love knows no barriers." The music started to play, and mother and son joined the children in the dance. It was a beautiful, moving scene that showed how small gestures of love can transform entire lives. In the improvised audience, parents and guardians watched with pride. Many of them had arrived there with sad and disheartened children, and now they saw kids who were confident and full of dreams. Ms. Betty, now 75, still showed up every Sunday to watch the presentations. She always said that Park had become the most beautiful place in the city. Sarah had been promoted and now coordinated inclusion programs across the state, using Charity and Ethan's project as a model. Deborah worked at the dance school for a few years, taking care of the cleaning and organization. She said she had never worked in such a joyful place, and Charity found out years later that she had remarried and turned her life around. She never tried to contact Ethan again, which, in everyone's opinion, was for the best. The boy who was once alone and sad in a park had become a young man who inspired hundreds of other children. The street sweeper who worked humbly sweeping streets had become a respected educator across the country. But more than that, they had become a family that proved true love can overcome any obstacle, any prejudice, any limitation. "Ethan," Charity said at the end of that Sunday afternoon, "do you want to know what the happiest day of my life was?" "Which one?" "The day I asked you if you wanted to dance." "And do you know what mine was?" "Which one?" "The day you didn't give up on me." They hugged each other there in the park, surrounded by the children who were still playing and dancing. The sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, creating the perfect backdrop for the end of another day in which they had made a difference in the lives of dozens of people. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a huge help for us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. 5 years had passed since that first meeting in the park. Ethan was now 16 and had become a national reference in adaptive dance. His school had graduated over 200 students, many of whom had pursued professional careers in dance. Charity, at 55, had discovered a talent she never knew she possessed. Besides coordinating the school, she had specialized in therapy through dance, helping children and adults overcome trauma and limitations. On that Tuesday morning, they were at the school preparing for a special presentation. It was the project's 5-year anniversary, and they had invited officials, the media, and most importantly, all the families who had been impacted over the years. "Mom, are you nervous?" asked Ethan, adjusting the sound equipment. "A little," admitted Charity. "I never thought we'd come this far. Do you remember what you always tell me? That we don't dance for others. We dance to express what we feel in our hearts." Charity smiled. Ethan had learned the lessons she tried to teach him well. The school they had built was simple but functional. 2 large rooms with mirrors and adaptable bars, a small stage for presentations, accessible changing rooms, and a common area where families could wait and interact. The walls were decorated with photos of every student who had passed through, trophies won in competitions, and inspiring phrases written by the children themselves. One of the phrases that most moved visitors was right at the entrance, written in the childish handwriting of 11-year-old Ethan. "Here, everyone can fly, each in their own way." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the guests began to arrive. The mayor, city council members, school principals, doctors, physical therapists, social workers, and, most importantly, dozens of families with their children. Charity had prepared a speech, but when the time came to speak, the words she had memorized vanished from her mind. She looked at the audience, saw all those familiar faces, all those stories of resilience, and decided to speak from the heart. "5 years ago, I was just a street sweeper who cleaned a park," she began, her voice emotional. "I had a simple life and honest job, but I felt like something was missing." Ethan was in the front row, smiling and encouraging her with his eyes. "One day I saw a sad boy sitting alone on a bench. That's all he was, a sad boy. But something inside me said I needed to do something. I didn't know what, I had no plan. I just knew that boy deserved to be happy." Many people in the audience were moved. Some knew the story from the beginning, others were hearing it for the first time. Today, 5 years later, that boy has become my son, and together we discovered that a simple act can transform not just 2 lives, but hundreds of them. Charity paused and looked at the children who were present. "Every child who comes through this school teaches me something new about courage, about resilience, about joy. They teach me that a disability is not a limit, it's just a different way of living." Ethan stood up and began to applaud. Soon the entire audience joined him in an ovation that lasted several minutes. "Now," said Charity when the applause died down, "I'd like to introduce some of our children so you can see what it means to dance with your heart." The first performance was by a group of 5 children with Down syndrome. They danced a joyful and colorful choreography, showing impressive synchronization and, most of all, a contagious joy. Next came the turn of 3 teenagers with visual impairments. They had developed their own technique, using sound and touch to orient themselves in space. Their performance was so precise and beautiful, it left everyone speechless. The third group was made up of children in wheelchairs, led by Ethan. They presented a choreography that told the story of the school itself, from the first meeting in the park to that very moment. When the music ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The mayor, a man who rarely showed emotion in public, was visibly moved. "Charity," he said, stepping onto the stage, "on behalf of the city, I would like to announce that this school will receive permanent support from City Hall. You deserve all the recognition possible." The audience erupted in applause once more. Charity and Ethan hugged, knowing that this official support would ensure the project's continuity for many years. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. "We have one more announcement," said the mayor. "Your project has caught the attention of the state government. Ethan Parker has been chosen to represent our state at the National Youth Paralympics, which will take place next year." Ethan was in shock. Since he was little, he had dreamed of competing at such a high level, but had never imagined it would be possible. "Does that mean I will compete with the best in the United States?" he asked, still not believing it. "Exactly," confirmed the mayor, "and City Hall will fund your entire preparation." Charity began to cry with joy. Seeing her son achieve such a big dream was more than she could have imagined 5 years ago. After the ceremony, the families gathered in the common area for a community snack. It was a more informal moment, where everyone could talk and share experiences. Charity was approached by a woman she didn't know, who had an elegant but simple appearance. "Charity, my name is Samantha Wells. I'm a journalist and I would like to do a story about your work." "Oh, that's good. It's always important to publicize the project." "Actually, I have a bigger proposal," said Samantha, with a mysterious smile. "I work for a publisher and we would like to publish a book telling your story." Charity was surprised. "A book? But I'm not a writer." "You don't need to be. I would write it based on conversations with you. The story is so beautiful it deserves to be known across the country." Ethan, who had overheard the conversation, was excited. "Mum, imagine how many people could be inspired by our story." "That's exactly it," confirmed Samantha. "Stories like yours can motivate other people to make a difference in their communities." Charity thought for a moment. She had never imagined her life was interesting enough for a book, but if it could help other people... "All right," she said. "If it will help other children like Ethan, I accept." In the following months, Charity and Ethan's lives became even busier. Besides the school's normal activities, Ethan began training intensively for the Youth Paralympics, and Charity participated in interviews for the book being written. During the interviews, she recalled moments she had almost forgotten. Ethan's sadness in the first few months, the challenges of adapting the house for him, the sleepless nights when he had nightmares about his biological parents. "Was it difficult?" Samantha asked in one of the sessions. "Very," admitted Charity. "There were days when I thought I wouldn't make it. Ethan was a very wounded child and I didn't know how to help." "What made you continue?" "Love, and the certainty that he deserved a chance to be happy." Ethan also participated in some interviews, telling his version of the story. "What was the moment you knew that Charity would be your real mother?" asked Samantha Wells. Ethan thought for a moment. "It was on the first day when she invited me to dance. No one had ever seen me beyond the wheelchair. She saw that I was a whole person." "And what was your life like before?" "I existed, but I didn't live. With Mother Char, I learned that I could dream, that I could be happy, that I could make a difference in other people's lives." The interviews revealed exciting details that not everyone knew. How Charity had sold her only valuable objects to buy the first sports wheelchair for Ethan. How she had studied basic physical therapy from borrowed books to better help him. How Ethan had given his first trophies to other children at the school who couldn't afford them. While the book was being prepared, Ethan dedicated himself to training. His preparation for the Paralympics was intense. 5 hours of training a day, nutritional monitoring, physical therapy, and psychological support. Charity made a point of following everything closely. Even with all the responsibilities of the school, she never missed an important training session. "Mom, you don't have to come every day," said Ethan one afternoon after a particularly difficult training session. "Of course I do. You are my priority." "But what about the school and the other children?" "Ethan," said Charity, sitting next to him, "one of the most important things I've learned over these years is that being a mother doesn't mean being physically present all the time. It means being emotionally available whenever you need me." Ethan smiled and hugged his mother. "I know I can count on you always." 3 months before the Paralympics, a surprise changed everyone's plans. Samantha Wells arrived at the school with unexpected news. "The book is finished and is already being printed," she announced excitedly. "But we have even better news." "What is it?" asked Charity and Ethan in unison. "A television producer is interested in the story and wants to make a documentary about you." Charity was alarmed. "A documentary? Won't that interfere with our privacy?" "It would be done with great respect," explained Samantha Wells. "The idea is to follow Ethan's preparation for the Paralympics and show how the school works. Nothing invasive." Ethan was excited by the idea. "Mom, imagine how many people will see that it's possible to overcome any difficulty." "It's true," agreed Samantha Wells. "The documentary would be broadcast on a national network. It could inspire thousands of people." After speaking with the school team and with Ethan, Charity agreed to the documentary. The film crew began following their activities twice a week. What most impressed the directors was the naturalness of the relationship between mother and son. There was no posing or acting. They simply lived their lives authentically and lovingly. "You have something very special," said the documentary director after a week of filming. "It's rare to see such a genuine family connection. Perhaps because our family was built through love, not just blood ties," reflected Charity. The filming captured unique moments. Ethan teaching other students, Charity comforting a mother whose son had just had an accident, the two of them dancing together at a special performance to raise funds for the school. But the most emotional moment came during a physical therapy session. Ethan was having difficulty with a specific movement and was getting frustrated. "I'm not going to get it," he said, discouraged. "Ethan," said Charity, approaching him, "do you remember what happened on the first day we met? You invited me to dance. And why did you think you could dance?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Because you believed I could." "So why can't you believe in yourself now?" Ethan smiled, recomposed himself, and tried the movement again. This time, he succeeded. "I did it," he shouted, euphoric. "You always could," said Charity. "You just needed to remember that." The camera captured the entire scene, and the director knew she had recorded a magical moment. 2 weeks before the Paralympics, the book was launched in a ceremony at the school itself. Hundreds of people attended, including students, alumni, family members, and officials. Charity held the book in her hands and couldn't believe it. There was her story, her life, printed on paper for the whole world to read. The chosen title was Dancing with the Heart, a story of love and resilience. "How does it feel to see your life turned into a book?" asked a journalist present. "Emotional," replied Charity, "but mostly hopeful that other people can be inspired and make a difference in a child's life." Ethan also received a copy and was flipping through the pages with curiosity. "Mom, look here," he said, pointing to a photo of himself at 11 years old. "I was really small. In size, maybe. In courage, you've always been a giant." The launch ceremony included performances by various groups from the school. Each performance told a piece of the story of resilience that had inspired the book. At the end of the evening, Charity went on stage for the final words. "When I was little," she began, "my mother always said that life was full of opportunities to do good. She said that what mattered wasn't the size of the good deed, but the sincerity of the heart." The audience listened in absolute silence. For a long time I thought my life was too ordinary to make a difference. I was just a street sweeper, a simple woman with a simple job. Until the day I met Ethan. Ethan was in the front row, smiling proudly. "Ethan taught me that we don't need to be special to do special things. We just need to have the courage to reach out to those in need." Charity paused and looked at all the children present. "Every child who passes through this school reminds me every day that love is the most powerful force in the world. And love doesn't choose an age, it doesn't choose a social condition, it doesn't choose whether you have a disability or not. Love simply chooses to love." The ovation was long and emotional. People cried, hugged each other, feeling inspired by those simple but profound words. Finally, the day of the Youth Paralympics arrived. Ethan had trained for months, was in great physical and mental shape, and felt ready for the competition. Charity, who had never traveled far from her town, was nervous about the trip to Washington, D.C., where the competition would be held, but Ethan reassured her. "Mom, no matter what happens there, I've already won the most important prize of my life. A family that loves me. The competition lasted 3 days. Ethan competed in the adapted dance for wheelchair users category solo event. There were 16 competitors from all over the country, some with international experience. On the first day were the qualifying rounds. Ethan placed fourth, securing a spot in the semi-finals. "How are you feeling?" asked Charity after his performance. "Happy," Ethan replied simply. "I'm doing what I love, in the place I always dreamed of being." On the second day, the semi-finals were more tense. Ethan needed to finish in the top 3 to reach the final. His performance was technically perfect, but it lacked a bit of the emotion that usually characterized his performances. He placed third, qualifying for the final by a very small margin in the scoring. "I'm proud of you," said Charity. "You've come this far facing high-level competitors. But I know I can do better tomorrow," replied Ethan, determined. On the night before the final, Ethan had trouble sleeping. Charity noticed his anxiety and sat on the bed next to him. "Ethan, what's worrying you? What if I can't do it? What if I disappoint everyone who believes in me?" Charity smiled tenderly. "My son, you've already surpassed all expectations. 6 years ago, you were a sad and lonely boy. Today, you're in the finals of the Youth Paralympics. That in itself is a huge victory." "But I want to win, Mom. I want to prove that everything we went through was worth it." "Ethan, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already proven to yourself that you are capable of achieving any dream, and that's what really matters." Ethan calmed down and managed to fall asleep. The next day, he woke up feeling serene and confident. The final took place in the afternoon, with an audience of nearly 1,000 people. It was the first time Ethan had performed for so many people. When his turn came, he looked out at the audience and met the eyes of Charity, who was in the front row. She made a simple gesture. She placed her hand on her heart and smiled. Ethan understood the message. Dance with your heart. The music began. It was Amazing Grace, the same song from the first day he and Charity danced together in the park. He had chosen this song to honor the moment that changed his life. During the 4-minute performance, Ethan transcended. It wasn't just technique. It wasn't just rehearsed movements. It was the pure expression of a soul that had found its reason for living. He danced his story, the loneliness, the meeting with Charity, the discovery of a mother's love, the building of a family, the dreams fulfilled. Every movement told a piece of his journey. When the music ended, there were a few seconds of absolute silence. Then the audience erupted in an ovation that seemed to have no end. People were on their feet, crying, applauding with emotion. Ethan looked at Charity and saw she was crying with joy. He made a gesture with his hands as if he were flying, and she understood. He was truly flying. The score took a while to come out. When it was finally announced, Ethan had won first place unanimously by the judges. Charity ran to hug him. Mother and son embraced there in the center of the floor, surrounded by the applause of the crowd. "We did it, Mom," said Ethan through tears of joy. "We did it, my son. We flew together." The award ceremony was emotional. Ethan climbed onto the podium holding the gold medal, but his first action was to call Charity to come up with him. "This medal isn't just mine," he said into the microphone. "It belongs to the whole family, to the whole school, to all the people who believed it was possible to fly." Charity climbed onto the podium, hand in hand with Ethan. When the national anthem played and they placed their hands on their hearts, both knew that this was the most special moment of their lives. After the competition, they were approached by several coaches and sports officials. Ethan received invitations to train at high-performance centers and even to represent the United States in international competitions. "What do you think?" asked Charity when they were alone. "I want to accept," said Ethan, "but on one condition." "What?" "That you come with me wherever I need to go, and that we never abandon our school." "Of course," replied Charity. "We're a family. We go everywhere together." The trip back home was triumphant. At the bus station in Washington, D.C., they were greeted by a small crowd of journalists and fans who had followed the competition on television. In their hometown, the reception was even bigger. The mayor, the city council, hundreds of students from the school, neighbors, friends, Everyone was there to celebrate Ethan's success. "You are the pride of our city," said the mayor in his speech. "You've proven that with determination and love, any dream can become reality." Miss Betty, now over 80 years old, was in the front row of the reception. When Ethan passed near her, she called him. "Ethan, my boy, do you remember when I said that one day you would fly high?" "Yes, I remember, Miss Betty." "Well, you flew higher than I ever imagined, but the most beautiful part is that you didn't forget where you came from." Ethan hugged the woman who had been one of the first to support his dream. The following months were about adapting to the new routine. Ethan started training at a high-performance center 3 times a week, but kept his participation at the local school on the other days. Charity divided the school responsibilities with other teachers, so she could accompany Ethan's training when necessary. The documentary about them was shown and had a major national impact. Thousands of people were inspired by the story, and many adapted dance schools were created in other cities using the model they developed. The book became a bestseller, and all the royalties went to maintaining the school and providing scholarships for underprivileged children. "Mom," said Ethan one afternoon after a book signing session, "have you ever stopped to think about how much our lives have changed?" "Every day," answered Charity. "Sometimes it feels like a dream. But you know what hasn't changed?" "What?" "The love between us, and the certainty that we can make a difference in people's lives." Ethan was right. Despite all the fame, all the awards, the national recognition, their essence remained the same. They were still a mother and son who loved each other unconditionally and used that love to transform other people's lives. 2 years after the first gold medal, Ethan was called up to the senior United States team. At 18, he would be the youngest athlete on the national adapted dance team. "I'm nervous," he admitted on the eve of his first international competition. "That's normal," said Charity. "But remember, you're not just representing the United States. You're representing all the children who ever felt incapable of dreaming." The international competition was in London. It was the first time Charity had left the United States, and everything was new to her. "Mom, are you okay?" asked Ethan, noticing she was quiet on the plane. "I'm thinking about my mother," answered Charity. "She always said that if we did good, good would come back to us multiplied. I never imagined it would come back like this." In London, Ethan competed against the best adapted dancers in the world. The competition was much tougher than anything he had faced before. In the first performance, he placed 7th out of 20 competitors. It wasn't a bad result for an international debut, but he was disappointed. "I expected more," he said after the performance. "Ethan," said Charity, "you're competing with people who have been dancing longer, who have different training structures. The important thing is that you're here representing our country." "But I want to win, Mom." "And you will. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. Because you have something that no technique can teach. You have soul." On the second day of competition, Ethan changed his approach. Instead of trying to imitate the technical style of the other competitors, he decided to be true to what he had learned, to dance with his heart. His performance was completely different from the first day. More emotional, more American, more authentic. He told through dance the story of a boy who discovered he could fly. The result was surprising. 3rd place, his first international medal. "How do you feel?" asked an American journalist covering the competition. "Grateful," answered Ethan. "Grateful for having the chance to show that American dance has a special soul." "And what's the next goal?" "To keep growing as an athlete, but mainly to keep helping other children discover that they can fly too." The interview was broadcast in the United States and moved thousands of people. Ethan had become not only a successful athlete, but a true ambassador for inclusion. When they returned to the United States, they were welcomed as heroes. But what moved Ethan the most was the reception at his school. The children had prepared a special performance, dancing Amazing Grace in his honor. "Thank you," he said, visibly moved. "You remind me every day why I do what I do." "Ethan," said one of the students, an 8-year-old girl with cerebral palsy, "one day I want to be like you." "You are already like me," Ethan replied, kneeling in front of her. "You have courage, you have dreams, you have love in your heart. That is all you need to fly. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story and where you are watching from. Do you believe that small gestures of love can transform lives? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. What moved you the most about Ethan and Charity's journey? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you very much for joining us.